Excellent. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our May District 2 SAC meeting for Anne Arundel County. We're really excited to have you all today. There's lots going on, which is good. And we have an action-packed agenda and some amazing speakers. I just want to confirm the agenda with everybody. We will have a discussion of Bill 31-22. And then we're going to have a presentation from Transportation and Planning, and a presentation from Traffic and Engineering. Just want to make sure that everybody's okay with that agenda. There's no additions or changes. Going once, going twice, perfect, okay. And then quickly wanted to see as well, everyone was sent the SAC meeting notes from last month. Hopefully, are there any changes, discussion items from those notes that were from last month? Okay, great. Would someone like to move that we approve those minutes? And I need a second. I see Nicole has moved to do that. Thomas, did you second?
Second.
Okay, perfect. All right, Thomas, a second. Any objections? Going once, going twice. Hearing no objections, the minutes are passed. That's great. Well, perfect. So we will go ahead and go straight into our discussion. We know there's been a lot of conversation regarding Bill 31-22, which passed the County Council on a 7-0 vote. We're very honored tonight to have Councilwoman Sarah Lacy from District 1 here to speak. She was one of the main co-sponsors of the bill. We will also be joined from someone from the Pittman administration. I believe that person is stuck in traffic. So once she joins us, she will give remarks as well. But in our conversations with Councilwoman Lacy, we wanted to give her the opportunity to open up this session. Thought it would be great if she could give a little bit more overview and background on the bill, and then some steps moving forward. We do appreciate the Councilwoman and Councilman Pruski for providing some background information to us earlier in the month, which I thought was very, very helpful in answering some of the frequently asked questions of this bill. But I still think it's really important to hear it exactly from the legislators who authored the legislation, and then we'll give some time for the SAC members to ask some questions. I do ask, because we are on a tight time frame tonight, that for the SAC members, if you could keep your questions clear and concise. We'll try to do each person for 1 minute to kind of keep us on track. So I'll kind of monitor the time and the questions. So with that, I would like to introduce Councilwoman Sarah Lacy and welcome her. And the floor is yours, Councilwoman.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you for having me. It's an honor for me to be with you, but it's an honor for me to be with you. I really appreciate all the work that you're doing, and it's pretty brave. You're going first into the unknown. The folks who come in the regional groups in a few years from now are going to be doing everything based on what you guys do in your process. So thank you for serving in that time commitment to the county. For Bill 31-22, I think actually, if I remember correctly, it was Mr. Pruski who came to me with the idea about the bill first. Both of our councilmanic districts obviously are very impacted by the fort, but of course the whole county is. And so when we got into the drafting process, I just took the lead on it. That's the only reason my name is before his, because he was actually around way back when it was actually BRAC. The BRAC program doesn't exist anymore. And so he's seen that develop over more years than I have. And in any event, it seemed to us, looking at overall how the original BRAC program since 2010, I think, was that last major revision that did this off the top of my head. But since it applied to the entire county and to the larger parcels that had to be assembled within the entire county, we just thought about, we've been hearing this for 4 years. He'd been hearing it for longer than that, of the need for housing for employees at Fort Meade. And that need was just not only not going away, it's actually growing. And that some of these folks, it's really important to them to live very close to their employer. There are additional inconveniences if you live far away. When you think of like having to have a commute, you also, when you're there, you may need to tack on an additional 25 minutes each way, once you're even just trying to park and then get to your office, those kinds of things that are they're just a quality of life issue. But, you know, we both understand. My husband works on the fort for these same secretive folks, right? So, you know, we don't name who they are, but I do know that recruiting them is very, very important, and retaining them is very important. So we looked at it first from that standpoint of how could we help achieve this goal that they have. You know, I don't know why they don't build more housing on the fort, but that's not up to me. And I don't even think of that as a possibility. I was thinking, well, we can do this in the community that's nearby around the fort. And if we shrink it down to be within a manageable radius of the fort, while at the same time shrinking the size of the parcels, it seemed to me that would be more efficient and therefore sort of more smarter growth in a way. We've already put in a lot of investments in the infrastructure around Fort Meade, the county infrastructure. And while I think, you know, no matter what, there's always going to be more that we could do and more things we could improve. We felt that the provisions we added to this conditional use about the connectivity between existing parcels and, you know, being able to walk or have a path connecting were important pieces to kind of take it to sort of the next generation BRAC housing. That's what we were looking at.
Great. So I think, can you talk a little bit more about like what, now that the legislation has passed, what are next steps with it, and what do you see as the process, and, you know, what are kind of, what's the plan after this?
So the next steps are really whenever a developer has a parcel that, you know, they now have to have 5 acres, right? And it could be an assemblage of parcels that comes up to 5 acres, but they would just follow the normal development submission and review process. Because remember, it's a conditional use. So on C4, W1, and the 4 MXD zones that it applies to, right, you can develop under any of the uses that are permitted in those zones, and where there are conditional uses, you meet the conditions and you can develop on it.
Okay. All right, well, I know that it sounds like Lori has not joined us, correct, Mark?
Not yet, but it might be imminent here.
Okay, well, with that, then let's go ahead and use the raised hand features for the SAC members, and we can get started on questions. So I just will go with the first hand raise feature that I see. So, and like I said, if you could keep your questions relatively concise, that would be helpful. No meandering long questions would be great. Have any questions for the Councilwoman? Can't believe there's no, okay, Nicole, yes.
Can't find that raised hand thing.
Oh, it's okay.
So one of the concerns I have is for developers being able to string 5-acre parcels together to create larger parcels. Was there a provision in the bill against that?
No, I'm not sure I understand the problem as you've described it, because I think that should be perfectly fine under this bill if it's under the same ownership of the 5 acres, total of 5 acres.
Right. So in an effort to not have any more of these mega developments and to have smarter growth, you could have a developer do a 5-acre, 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 and string together another 25-acre mega development, which is something that some of us were trying to avoid. And then that's something that we were hoping would come before us as a zoning and planning decision that now wouldn't need to necessarily. They could go ahead and do that without needing to come to us for a zoning and planning decision. So this bill kind of blindsided us. We just took a tour with the PIO. This was not brought up at all. They told us how many jobs are coming. We're aware of all the construction that's going on. And then not even a week later, here comes the bill from you and Councilman Pruski. I live in your legislative district, literally around the corner.
I know, you live down the street from me. I know exactly where you live.
From you, in your old house and your new house. And,
I know.
And none of this was brought to my attention. Like, you didn't call me. Councilman Pruski and I have a great working relationship. He didn't call. And this was very blindsiding. And this really should have been brought to our attention before this came to the table. And I think that's why I called Councilman Prisky on a cell phone and said, what is going on here? So that we could have had a better conversation. And I think that's why there was a big outcry from the SAC, because we felt like this was usurping us. And I think you guys got a lot of phone calls from us saying, hey, why is this happening? So we're aware of the jobs coming to the port. We took, like I said, we took the tour with the PIO. We're aware of all of them that are coming now. When the buildings are done, we saw the construction happening. The concern is that they can string together these 5-acre parcels and make, like you just said, yeah, no provision. So they can do that. They can make these 5-acre, 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 5-acre parcels into.
Would you like me to answer your questions?
And then the other question I have is the concerns that we all had. We had a nice presentation from the school board. They have 0 provisions in place from their perspective for the elementary and middle schools issues that exist. And then the other concerns we had were for water, sewer, and road infrastructure. So we'll talk with Nestor and those fine folks for the issues related to the roads around here that are still.
So let me answer your questions, because I have an answer for all of your questions. And I think it's important. The questions you've asked are very important. It's important that the SAC be fully educated about what the bill does, but also about the council's role, the SAC's role, OPZ's role. What you've just asked is you've rolled a whole bunch of questions into one ball. I'd like to untangle that a little bit, okay? Yeah. With respect to the bill and the 5 acres, the 5 acres is the minimum parcel size that has to be assembled to be able to build this residential use under the conditional use framework, okay? So it doesn't address any parcels larger than 5 acres, because if you look before at what the first bill did when it set a minimum of 25 acres, this is following that framework and saying, but we're shrinking it down. And we did also look at what is the likelihood that someone's actually going to be able to assemble multiple parcels of 5 + 5 + 5 + 5 within districts 1 or 4, for example. There are very few parcels that even meet the criteria that are in the bill 3122. So we don't think that's likely. And if it happens, then the owner of those parcels has the same right as any other property owner to go and seek to develop them however they wish to within the bounds of the code. So one of the things Bill 3122 expressly did not change, made no provision at all to change adequate public facilities. So there's no need for concern there, because that process is already handled in the code and in the departments, and there's no slack cut for these projects. In the same way, there's no slack cut from the adequate public facilities for schools requirements. Now, there is a work group that's been working for a few years on reforming what those requirements are and how we determine what's adequate, because the reality is we do have 10,000 extra seats in our school system that we're all paying for. And the problem with overcrowding that we have is more a political problem of a lack of will to redistrict schools than it is about not having capacity. It's where is the capacity? This bill doesn't give anybody slack on adequate public facilities for schools. If they don't meet the tests for the development they propose, they won't be allowed to build. That's
for 6 years.
The way it
they
is.
can pay their fees and wait 6 years and then build, though.
Exactly, and somebody else can work on that in the future. But yeah, basically. But hi. Yeah, that's true. And to your point about contacting the SAC and contacts that I can't speak to what contacts Councilman Pruski received. I did not receive contacts just beyond a few from SAC. I did get inundated with emails from the Growth Action Network, and I believe you're probably familiar with some of the leadership and participants in that group, but not from the SAC. In my mind, you've been an SAC for a year now. Not quite 6 months, maybe
5 months.
5
5
months.
months.
5 months. Okay. So, I was there for the whole process of developing the GDP and the administration taking this first, doing a new thing of creating these regional groups that are coming after the general development plan. The county executive took the old way and flipped it on its head so that now we do small planning, small regional area planning after we've gotten the big plan together. But, in that, I keep the perspective of, I'm not a representative of Region 2. I'm not a representative of, any specific one of those regions for planning purposes. I'm a county council member. I'm a legislator, and so is Mr. Pruski. And I think that's why, the bill passed unanimously among the 7 of us, because that is what the county council does. The SAC, what you're doing is extremely valuable to the overall process, but you have to realize that as far as, you're going to come out of this process with zoning recommendations, for example, those are still going to have to go before the county council before they could actually be adopted and become law. And there will still be, questions asked and debate that is had. So to me, I just saw it as normal process. I'm sorry that it wasn't clear because I assumed you all knew what the normal process was. So my brain's been on a lot of other things, and I was definitely not thinking about contacting the SAC. So I apologize for that. It's a learning lesson for me, but I think I've answered all of your questions. I'm trying to think, did I miss any? But Joe, I should.
For water, sewer, and infrastructure. So, 198, Brock Bridge Road, Whiskey Bottom, they're all still 2-lane roads. The 175 is finally widened. It's still not enough. The ramp interchanges are coming. It's too little too late. So I still feel like there's not enough infrastructure in place to support any of this. There really isn't. And I don't think there were any provisions in the bill that were put in place to protect any green space that's already here that we're losing rapidly, not to mention the water, sewer, infrastructure just to support any of these changes that are going to come. The watershed was built, and there's still, Whiskey Bottom is 2 lanes, Brock Bridge is 2 lanes, 198 is a disaster anytime after 3:30 trying to get to the 32 interchanges. That's not going to change with the 1,500 units that he's building there. You know what I mean? Like there's no protection for infrastructure that is going to be put in place for any of these new units that are going to come, I mean,
All right, so
I think that is definitely a long-term issue. Yeah.
Are we
Sorry,
open
go
for a
ahead.
differing opinion?
Yeah, well, Thomas, let me go ahead and go to you. You have your hand raised.
I'd love to jump in. Thank you. And I just make sure understand on the stakeholder to committee. I don't feel blindsided by this at all. So I want to just correct the record to say not everyone on this committee believes that we were blindsided. And I know I don't speak for all of us, but I speak for a few of us. These properties this is an existing law that is being modified. It's being modified and concentrated in one of the high growth areas of the county. This is the most appropriate place for development to occur, where we want the investments. Where we don't want it is on, near the waterways and such. These are, as Councilwoman Lacy mentioned, this is where the county has been making investments. These are properties that have been slated for development for several years. So it's not like this is a rezoning. It's not a rezoning at all. This isn't R1 to W1. These are properties that have always been intended to be developed. And what this legislation does is give flexibility around the growth areas where you need the most flexibility on intended develop. Now, all that said, the schools aren't wide open. So all these buildings aren't going to get built and taxed or dumped into the schools because they're still has. And I understand the argument now they could just wait 6 years, but you still have to pay the fees to offset the impact of the roads, of the schools, of the safety, of the fire, all those kind of things. And want to jump on this. There was a lot of bad information that was initially put out there because a lot of misreadings of this bill that got a lot of people's hair on fire. And rightfully so, the council took a step back and said, hey, let's give this another few weeks for everyone to calm down, think about it, look into it, so we can have more conversations about it. And after all that time, and after all the attention GAN gave it, none of them showed up at the hearing to give a single comment. Nobody, it wasn't that important because they realized, at least I like to think so, that they realized that, oh, this is not a rezoning, that this is where we want development. Many of us, I'll just even cite on the stakeholder group on that weekend, the tours that we did. I remember the group I was with on Sunday going down to the racetrack, going down to Annapolis Junction, and being on the Anne Arundel County side, two different areas, being on the Anne Arundel County side, looking at Howard County, said, why can't we have that here in Anne Arundel County? People that were with me had that same reaction. This kind of bill does just that. And for the record, you know, this our stakeholder 2 group has been together for 5 months. This legislation, these discussions have been going on for, I want to say, 9 to 12. This isn't something that came after those tours. This is something that's been in the works for a long time. And I never expected anybody to pick up the phone and call me for my approval as a stakeholder 2 member, but it's something that, you know, I think we can all walk and chew gum at the same time. The growth that's coming to the fort is real. If any of you drive onto the fort, you see cranes, you see building, you see jobs. Locating the housing in our communities is what makes sense, so we can get the taxation, so it can be one of the best places for everyone to live in this community as well. All right, there's my soapbox.
All right, Jim, you have your hand up.
Joe, do you mind if I just jump in here for a second? So Lori Rhodes is on the call here. She's dialed in here. So
okay, well, let's go ahead and have Jim, because he's
Yep.
an SAC member and he's had his hand up, and then we'll go to Lori. So Jim?
Yeah, thanks. I just want to address a couple points. One was just the impact to infrastructure and green space. I think Councilman Lacy made a good point that any new project, regardless of its, whether in this 4-mile radius or elsewhere in the county, needs to meet all APF requirements. And that would not only include schools, but also roads and water and sewer infrastructure. So if the infrastructure isn't sufficient, the project won't be able to proceed. And that holds true for any new development. And the bill doesn't offer any relief in that department. The other comment, just to clarify, because I do work on the watershed project, is that project too had to test for all adequate public facilities. And just to go on the record, that project put a 12 classroom addition on Meade High School. It also contracted to build Monarch Global Academy. It also did road widening along the entire stretch of 198 from 295 to 32. It also built water and sewer infrastructure from its site all the way to Maryland City. So it's difficult sometimes when you see a project just coming out of the ground and homes being built, but there's lots of time and lots of testing that goes into any new project. And if it doesn't meet APF, you have to build additional infrastructure to support your subdivision, which was the case in that project. So just wanted to make a comment on those couple things. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Jim. All right, Mark, so, and glad to have Nishara Hilton join us from SAC members, so glad to have you. So Mark, do you want to go ahead and introduce Lori and have her, it sounds like she's called in.
Yeah, so again, she's on the phone here calling in, but Lori, if you wanted to say a few words, feel free about the bill, or if anybody had any questions then for the county executive's office.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lori Rhodes. I'm the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for Land Use under County Executive Pittman. I know you've all received a letter from the county executive promising to transfer power to communities, and you being members of the Region 2 planning process is very important to the administration. He did send a letter to everyone explaining his views on that bill, that mixed use bill, and as you are aware, that bill was passed in 2010. The original zoning bill was passed in 2010 for the sole purpose for the BRAC Realignment and Closure Act. And so they were anticipating that there would be an influx of people coming in regards to the base realignment. Bases closed in New Jersey and other areas in Maryland, and they went to Fort Meade. Those influx of people are anticipated to increase based on the number of buildings that have been constructed there. As you know, the legislative body has the right to amend the zoning code. And in this case, you know, they amended the BRAC mixed-use zoning category to reduce the radius of where this mixed use could take place on C4, W1, and mixed-use zoning districts. And as I heard prior to joining this call, a project cannot move forward unless it addresses all of Article 17 and other regulations such as Article 16, which addresses stormwater management. So adequacy of public facilities has to be addressed. That's water, roads, sewer, schools, stormwater, and fire suppression. And I don't know if you had any additional questions about the bill that I can try to answer for you.
Great. Well, we've had a really good discussion so far and some questions. I know we're running a little over time. I don't want to definitely limit conversation. This is important, but does anybody else, if they could use, either raise their hand or have any follow-up questions for the administration? Marilee is reconnecting. I don't know if she might give her a second. Marilee, did you have any questions? I saw you reconnected.
No, I just lost connection. I had to move to a
Okay,
different
no
part of
problem.
the house.
No problem. I just wanted to make sure. I didn't want to just exclude you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, seeing, you know, no other questions or comments, I think this has been very helpful. I know we have a lot of other pieces, so wanted to thank Councilwoman Lacy and the Pittman administration for providing some background and insights. I think this has been a fruitful discussion. I think a lot of valid points have been made on both sides, which is very helpful. And of course, we'll reach out if we have any more questions to the Pittman administration to our county council members. So thank you,
Have
Sarah.
a good night, everybody.
Great. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark, who will give a little bit of just quickly about where we're heading, and then we'll introduce our next speakers from transportation planning. Mark?
Yeah, so I do just want to say a few words as we start talking about transportation. You know, and I think we talked about this when we were doing our driving tour, in the sense that there are certain trade-offs when you have certain land use and how it interacts with transportation. So, you know, we used to always separate commercial uses, industrial uses, office uses from residential uses. And so that created the need then for people to drive to these certain areas to shop or to go to work or to play. And we're now realizing or seeing what those impacts are, where we need to widen lanes, where there's traffic congestion, or there's increased carbon emissions as a result of that. So as we move through these next few topics with transportation planning, transportation engineering, housing is coming up in a few next month, as well as a few other topics, and just try to think about what these cost-benefit analyses are, or what the trade-offs are, and sort of what those impacts are. Is if we were to put residential close to or on top of commercial or on top of office, would we need wider roads? What would carbon emissions look like? So just try to think more, you know, holistically, I guess, when we're talking about transportation planning and how land use and the relationship between land use. So again, I'm just going to leave it at that, and I'll introduce Tanya from our Office of Transportation, and I will bring up the slideshow here in just a second. Right, and Carrie added one more note there in the chat for folks that for the SAC members, we're going to have that Jamboard open in the background for you all to add some comments, add some questions, so we can populate that and follow up if need be, or just help Office of Planning and Zoning with the direction of these goals, policies, strategies as we move forward. So with that, I will share my screen and hand it over to Tanya.
Good evening, everyone. This is Tanya Asman, and I apologize. I'm getting over a little bout of bronchitis, and I'm still coughing a little bit. So I wanted to say that I'm also joined by Crystal Miguel-Belk from our office. She's a planning administrator, kind of on the operations side of things, and I am the bicycle and pedestrian planner for the Office of Transportation. So next slide, I'm going to tell you a little bit about, or a lot about actually. We have quite a few slides, so I'll try to go through them quickly, what our office does. So as you can see here, this is sort of it in a nutshell. We do transportation planning, everything related to transit, bicycle and pedestrian, roadways as well. We do long-range planning, short-range, corridor studies. The Transportation Functional Master Plan fell under our purview. We also do transit operations. We have fixed route, microtransit, paratransit. We define the direction for capital projects yearly with in conjunction with the Department of Public Works. We provide the lists for transportation projects. We apply for and in some cases manage grants, federal and state level. And then we look at innovative ways to improve transportation. Next slide. So this is basically what we do in transportation planning. We have Move in Arundel. It's the Transportation Functional Master Plan, under which falls the Pedestrian and Bicycle Master Plan, the Transit Development Plan, Corridor Growth Management Plan, the MIF, Major Intersections and Important Facilities, and Complete Streets Guidance, all of which became adopted at the time that Move in Arundel did in 2019. We are also in the process of adopting a Vision Zero plan, which is a strategic highway safety plan that will focus on making our streets safer and preventing injuries and serious injuries and deaths. We participate in facility planning studies. We're participating in these region plans, town center plans. Regionally, we participate with the Baltimore Metropolitan Planning Organization. As you can see, there's several projects under there that we participate with. The Central Maryland Regional Transportation Plan. And then we partner with our local partners, such as the City of Annapolis, City of Baltimore, Howard County, all of which fall under the MPO. And at the state level, we participate on all of these plans that you've seen and more probably, including 2040 Maryland Transportation Plan, the Ped Bike Master Plan, the Statewide Transit Plan, and their Vision Zero Maryland Strategic Highway Safety Plan. Sorry, my voice is waning a little. Next slide. Did you hear me? Did I break up?
Nope. I did
Sorry.
advance it. Is that now showing up?
Yeah, there it goes.
Okay.
So for our transit operations, we run fixed route bus operations. As you can see, we have 45 vehicles and 8 fixed route bus lines. We participate with microtransit, call and ride zones. These are the 3 zones in South County where you can call and have on-demand service. And then there's paratransit for documented disabled population and elderly, 55 and over. By the way, it was just reduced to 55 recently. Next slide. This is a slide showing the fixed routes that are currently operating within the county. I know it's kind of small and hard to see. All of these are online if you want to take a closer look. I do want to point out that the Office of Transportation is new to the taking over the operating of transit, some of the transit lines in the county. So it's probably not as robust as it could be, but we're just getting started. Next slide. So this is where our our on-demand services in the South County, where you can call and get picked up to be then taken to the nearest transit stop. And we're considering expanding the service countywide. Next slide. And this slide describes our paratransit and elderly services. Again, the requirements are 18 and older with a disability, or 55 and older. You know, I'm not going to read all of these bullets, but this information will be available to the SAC via OPZ. Next slide. MTA, the Maryland Transportation Authority, also operates transit in the county. We coordinate services with them, do joint planning. We assist with the bus stop improvements. Next slide. I didn't see a slide in there. We also are partners with the Regional Transportation Authority. So as far as our projects, we participate in planning for the county capital improvement program, which I mentioned earlier. These can include corridor studies. They can include design requests and construction requests. And then at the regional level, we participate in the TIP with the Metropolitan Planning Organization. And at the state level, we contribute with the to the CTP through the priority letter, Chapter 30 scoring, and the STIP, which is the State Transportation Improvement Program. Excuse me. These are just some of the key projects that are in Region 2 right now that we wanted to highlight for you that are in the capital budget. Race Road, Brockbridge Road, Arundel Mills Shelter, that's a bus shelter, Town Center Boulevard Extension, Milestone Parkway Shared Use Path, Ridge Road Sidewalk, Ridge Chapel Road Improvements, Maryland 713 Shared Use Path, Severn Library Shelter. And then just outside of Region 2, but they connect very much with you guys, are these 4 that we've listed below. And then the SHA project, the big one is the Maryland 295, Maryland 175 interchange improvements. This is a list of the grants that we typically try to obtain. We have been pretty successful at getting bikeways grants, TAP grants. We have a Safe Routes to School grant currently getting underway. And then there's some new grants that are as a result of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, Reconnecting Communities, which aims at identifying barriers that, like physical barriers, highways that maybe went into underserved communities and bifurcated them. So this grant is aimed at eliminating those barriers and reconnecting them. Safe Streets for All, it's also a new program. It focuses on sort of like a Vision Zero type grant where you're trying to make the street safer. And then one thing to point out is that earmarks are back. So I think we did put in for an earmark request and have not heard back yet. And then this is a list of innovations that we're looking at. We've added some of these we've already incorporated. The level of traffic stress map is on the bicycle website. Uber dashboard, app for call and ride on demand services underway, the transit app, and mobility as a service. Next. This is a continued list of innovative things that we've been working on. One of the new things that I wanted to point out is that we did get a new technology to have automated counts on our buses instead of relying on the drivers. So the information will gather ridership information so that we can better identify where we need to expand and how. Next. I think the public facing dashboard, that's something that we're working on for the web page. And then I can't see hang on a second. I got to move my people screen away. So we're looking at a ferry service, actually is the latest innovative project, and that's kind of in partnership with the city as well, Queen Anne's County, Baltimore City, and looking at offering ferry services across the bay. Next. Moved it over my words. So these are some of the plans and activities going on. Prioritize transportation improvements and services. From Walk and Roll is the update to the pedestrian and bicycle master plan. We're also working on the transit development plan for the county. We're just getting underway with that. We're looking at updating the functional classification map. And we're kind of interested to hear from you on, do we want to continue to classify roads in the traditional way that they've been, sort of arterial, collector, things like that, or do we want to start looking at boulevards and urban versus suburban and rural and things like that. Other activities include performance metrics, data analytics, vehicle probe data, and commuting and employment data. Next slide. This is the suggested new connections and new roadway typologies. This is the existing functional classification map in Region 2. But like I said, we're looking for information from you guys on potential for new connections and how to identify the typologies of those roadways. Next slide. This is not showing up very well. This is something called vehicle probe data, and I'm going to scroll down on my screen if you give me just a second. So this is a source of information that we use that can show like bottlenecks and where congestion is happening. I don't know why it's not showing up very well, but that corridor is 295, and that's not surprising that that's where you would see the bottlenecks within Region 2. It's kind of a really cool tool, and I think that I think the public can use it too, and you can see over any period of time from yesterday to 5 years to show you trends. For example, during COVID, there was a lot less congestion on some of the major roadways, such as 97, and then we've started to see it pick up again. Next slide. This slide is showing you where are people living and working in Region 2, and it's demonstrating that most of the people that are working in Region 2 do not live there. And a lot of people are also leaving to go work elsewhere, and a very small amount actually live and work in Region 2. One of the qualifying factors for this map is that, Fort Meade is there and NSA, of course, and so some of these people that may have their work actual, official location at Fort Meade, they might be in a satellite office somewhere else or working from home. But in general, we believe these numbers to be fairly accurate for what's going on in Region 2. Next slide. Okay, I have to get my. This slide is showing more detailed data of where people are coming from. One of the highest is from Pasadena, and it can help reflect commuting patterns. And, you know, you can see the darker blue is where people are coming from. So it might support, say, a transit, you know, an express transit from these areas into Region 2. Just another planning tool we use. Next slide. So this is the update for Walk and Roll, the pedestrian and bicycle master plan that's still underway and still accepting comments at the interactive web map. If you go to the web page and go to Office of Transportation's page, you can find a link to that web page, which has a survey you can take, and as well as a map that you can drop a pin or draw a line and make a comment about where you might want to see an improvement or where you think there's issues. We hope to wrap this up in the fall and go to County Council sometime in September or October. Next slide. So there you have our contact information, which I'm sure OPZ will post to your site. Next slide. That's it.
Great, and I know that Mark, you were going to introduce, we have some other folks here to answer questions as well.
Yeah, so I did just want to jump in here real quick and just let folks know on the SAC that we do have a few representatives from M.SHA here. We have Tara Penders, Pete Regan, and Molly Porter here. So again, as we have the county as well as state representatives to help answer any questions.
Great, so we'll go ahead and use the raise hand function again, or raise your hand to SAC members, whichever works best for you for questions. I know we've had a lot of discussions about this during our driving tour. Well, while I have a few questions so I can get us started. One of the things that I'm really concerned about, and it was really a highlight of our driving tour as we drove around District 2, is the lack, and I know you talked about walk and roll, but just really want to emphasize the fact that there are many places that do not have sidewalks or contiguous sidewalks, and even places where children are supposed to wait for school buses and there's no place for them to wait. There's just the place for them to wait is in the middle of the street. So, you know, can you talk a little bit more about sidewalks and, you know, how, you know, what we can do to have more sidewalks or walkability? I also look at this from a standpoint of all ages safety, because not only is it youth, but it's also older adults. You know, older adults need, you know, as we have an older population, we're becoming more we need, you know, people have more mobility issues. So I think it's something that's really important. So if you could talk a little bit about, you know, sidewalks and kind of the ways we can make our communities more walkable, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah, so the subdivision regulations and the county as a whole has kind of steered the county into a suburban type county. And Mark kind of hit on this earlier. I was going to say the same thing, where, you know, when you're building land uses that are siloing everybody together, the residential in one pocket, the commercial or the retail or the services in another, then you're forced to get in your car. So I think that there was maybe a mind shift back in the long time ago, maybe in the 50s when the subdivision regulations came into effect, that you know, cars were a great way to get around. But as you can see over time, the subdivision regulations began adding in the requirement for sidewalks, and actually was in the requirements. So in the, you know, if you look at some of the subdivisions that were created in, say, the 70s, 80s, and 90s, a lot of them have sidewalks because they were in the regs. So let me back up a little bit. I think sidewalks get constructed in two ways. They get constructed either by the county or the state through the CIP process or the CTP process, or a combination of the two. And then the other avenue is through the subdivision process and the requirements that are put upon developers to do frontage improvements. I'm not going to get too much into all of that because OPZ handles development review, but those are generally primarily the two ways that sidewalks get constructed. I do know that in approximately 2019, the county determined that, oh, by the way, let me back up. In 2005, there was a overhaul of the subdivision regulations that took out the requirement for sidewalks that was explicitly stated in the code. They did continue to get constructed, but recently there was a determination that the county had no authority via code to require frontage improvements. It's my understanding that that is under review, and they're trying to fix that situation. I don't know the status of that. I would defer to OPZ on that. But that would be an important step, is to fix the regulations so that during the development process, the frontage improvements that are along the properties are created. The other issue is how fiscally constrained it is. Every year we have a budget, right? The sidewalk bikeway fund has $500,000, which really, when you think of it, that's countywide, that's a drop in the bucket. So we rely heavily on, and then beyond that, though, you can create standalone projects. But one of the biggest issues, again, is cost. And right-of-way becomes a very big issue if you don't have the right-of-way. The county doesn't, as a matter of practice, doesn't typically take right-of-way. We are required to purchase it. So a lot of times, if we have to go in and put in a sidewalk, these are all very big factors that we have to consider, is how much it's going to cost, what are the right-of-way issues. So we do try to get grants for this, but a lot of these grants are discretionary. They're all discretionary. In fact, we're competing against the entire state for a single pot of money. So I think, in the end, a lot of it just comes down to the budget and how it gets steered every year by who's in the administration, and also, again, the subdivision regulations. Does that help?
Yes, that's very helpful. Marilee has a question. Hi, Marilee.
I can't find the hand either.
That's okay. I saw your hand.
The real one.
A couple things. One, I just wanted to clarify that the point you made about the 2005 code, that only applies to site plans, not subdivisions. Subdivisions still require frontage improvements. But I did have a question, because there's so many state roads in Region 2. How do we get more interconnectivity on the state roads? How can we get sidewalks? I know they do bike lanes, but it seems like they don't do the sidewalks.
That's a complicated and somewhat loaded question. I was wondering if maybe a state representative would be able to speak to that.
Yeah, Tanya, this is Pete Rigby, State Highway Administration. I can kind of chime in. A lot of it's going to start with the local level plans and what the county is moving forward, or how the county plans the corridors. Like we can point at one, Maryland 175, and the work that's being done. The requirements being done there, the sidewalk and bicycle improvements. So the state was able to work with the county and develop that plan throughout the corridor. Then more on the lower level with developments along state roads. During the access permitting process, a development will come in, approved through the zoning process within the county. The state has guidelines. If the developer wants to touch the roadway, there'll be requirements to add the bicycle and pedestrian facilities. I don't know if that helps. Tara, if there's anything additional you might want to add.
Was there any other addition?
I would add that, like you said, a step further, if they're required to touch a state roadway, then they have to improve it to state standards. The trick is getting them to touch the state roadway and when they have to have an access permit or do improvements to the state roads. And as Marilee pointed out, there are cases where there's no code requirement in the county that says you need to do a frontage improvement. So in those cases, if that's not something that the local jurisdiction has asked the developer to do, because of that, then they're not touching the state road, then they don't need to develop it to state standards. Did I describe that correctly? Pete?
Yeah, I can agree with that. And once again, it's the idea if the developer wants to improve access to their development, that's when we would require it based on the state standards. But if they're not touching it, or if there's no requirement to touch it, then goes back to other avenues for those improvements.
Great. All right. Looks like we have a question from Jim. Jim?
Yeah, I just had a quick question about impact fees, and can those dollars that are generated from subdivision activity be used for road improvements such as sidewalk and such in the areas in which the developments are built? And the second part to that is it possible in the future for impact fees to be used in conjunction with some state projects as well?
I believe that is probably a better question directed at the Office of Planning Development and Zoning Development Division, who I believe is on this call to help with those questions.
So we don't work directly.
Okay,
We don't work directly. This is Margaret Kai-Ziegler. I'm the planning administrator in Office of Planning and Zoning in the Development Division. We don't, well, we do the review, and actually IMP takes in the money for the impact fees. The funds, the determination of how the funds are used is really through DPW and the CIP, which is the Office of Transportation. Development Division does not have a say as to how those funds are being used.
Thanks.
Any other questions from SAC?
If funds are available through impact fees and they're part of the budget process, then yes, they can be directed towards those projects.
Okay. So I kind of a two-part question, but I think they meld. So I'll take two questions here. How has your planning and ideas for this changed through the pandemic? Because clearly people are working differently, they're commuting differently. So how is that changing your plans? And then how are you ensuring that you're using the American Rescue Plan and bipartisan infrastructure funds? I mean, on one end you said there's all this money, but then you also said, well, there's no money for sidewalks. So how can we use that literal fire hose of money that was showered upon the state and counties to help pay for this much needed infrastructure?
Well, yeah, I just went to a webinar today on the reconnecting communities. They're just opening up the funds. But I will say that we're already starting to see more funds coming through. The state, for example, has a bicycle retrofit fund called Fund 88. They have sidewalk retrofit for ADA. They have new sidewalk. They have three funds basically that are available, that they're getting more money. That last year we we're hearing they couldn't help us. This year, they're going to help us 100%. So, excuse me, this year is the first year that we're going to be starting to see that. So we're hopeful that we can, you know, have a lot more impact. When I say there's not a lot of funds, a lot of these are reimbursable. So you have to have the funds. In fact, not the ones I just mentioned, but all of the discretionary funds coming out of the federal and state grants are are reimbursable. So you have to have the funds up front and ready. You also have to have a match. You know, it's usually a 20% match. So for example, one of the projects that I'm applying for a grant for is $1 million TA grant. That means we need about $200,000 match money for the county to win the award. So we look to the CIP budget for that money. So if I have $500,000 in sidewalk bikeway and 200 of it is going to that match, that's one project, and that's for the design of a 2-mile shared use path, not the construction, just the design. So each of these steps require pretty large chunks of match money that, you know, that's only one project. So you can see why I'm saying there's just not enough to see a lot of activity all at once. I will say that we're in a lot of projects right now are in design. And I think this year, though, there's 3 trails that are going into construction that are handled by Rec and Parks. One is the Broadneck Trail Phase 3. The other is the WB&A Bridge across the Patuxent is actually beginning construction this spring. And then the other is the other phase of Broadneck Trail, which is, I think, 5 or 1B and 5, which goes down to Sandy Point. And those are all been long processes of getting grant money from the feds and the state for many, many years. I think the WB&A Bridge has been on the books for 20 years or something like that. So it's important, you know, we have these funds, 500,000, but then you can put a standalone project into the budget request, but in the end, you know, it's competing with everything else, right? So we have to, the county council ultimately approves the budget, and we just hope for the best. And this year we have Jumpers Hole Road is a project that's going from Route 2 to Mountain Road for shared use path and some congestion improvements. So things are happening. It's a slow, methodical process.
Great. All right. Well, are there any other questions from SAC members? Okay, great. Well, I just want to remind everyone, we do have the SAC members, we have the Jamboard where you can put your thoughts and comments, which is really, really helpful for us. So with that, I will go ahead and thank our presenters from Transportation Planning. I see that it's 7:08. I would like to have us take a 5-minute break. So we'll do that, and then we'll have our final session from Traffic Engineering. So if we could take 5 minutes, if we can reconvene around 7:13 p.m. my clock, that would be fantastic. So everybody take a break, get some water, and we'll be back soon. Thank you very much. So we'll have folks start to reconvene here. I'm glad we were able to take a break, and I think we're relatively on time, which is good. I try to land the plane on time, so we'll allow for a few more folks to come back. But I'm glad that we have both transportation earlier, and now we'll have traffic engineering to do this with that. And then we'll have some next steps as we talk about our next meeting, which will be in person. So with that, I will turn it back over to Mark for our next introduction and speaker. Mark.
Great. So next up is Nestor Flores, our Traffic Engineering Division Chief from the Department of Public Works. And I'll bring that presentation up here in just a second.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Joe. I see some familiar faces, which is great always to come to our group. So I know have some relationships. So just a quick note about myself. I've been with the county for close to 20 years now. I've been the area engineer, and also now for the past four and a half years, I've been the chief of traffic. So next slide, please. So Traffic Engineering Division is part of the Department of Public Works, of course, and we are part of the Bureau of Highways. So what do we do? So there are two offices associated within Traffic Engineering Division. The Traffic Engineering Office that is located on 2662 River Road. We are responsible for the operations, subdivision review, and traffic signals. When I say subdivision review, our role is 90%. We do some courtesy reviews out of in coordination with inspection and permits, in coordination with OPZ's traffic group, which Martha and Margaret are part of the meeting tonight. And we also do have a direct role in street lighting, as probably Merle can attest and Jim can attest. Traffic maintenance shop is what you will see out there, right? They do a lot of the maintenance of the traffic engineering assets. You're gonna see them with the bright colored shirts. Next slide, please. And basically, Mark, if you go to the next slide, please. So there are three questions I like to ask my staff, and also I ask myself often, because I want to make sure that we are in the right path. So what do we do, right? So very easy. That question is what is very easy. We maintain and operate traffic assets. Simple as that. And then the little bit harder question is, how do we do it? And we do this by applying traffic engineering principles, following national, state, and local guidelines. Some of you probably heard the Bible of traffic engineering is the manual uniform traffic control devices. And by state law, we got to follow it. So you might ask me, Nestor, can you get certain signs? I'm pretty much going to tell you no, unless it's in the manual. Next slide, please. But the harder question, and the question that gets us to go to work every day, and the question that make us come to meetings like such as this, and also go meet with communities face to face, is we believe that we played an integral part in ensuring that all traffic modes, pedestrian, bicyclists, transit, and vehicles flow through the county roadways efficiently, and more importantly, safely. Next slide, please. So traffic assets. So this is a quick picture of the countywide. As you can see, we maintain pavement markings. That will be the yellow lines, the white lines on the road, the yellow lines, the stop line, crosswalks. And by the way, these are only county roads. We don't touch state roads. We maintain signals. So there's 245 signalized location, 122 full signals. Those where you got the green, yellow, and red. And we have some specialized signals where we have intersection hazard beacons, and we have what we call flashers, right? You've probably seen them, and if you took a tour, I think on Region 2, you probably saw some of these flashing signals that we're trying to implement. We also maintain traffic signs, so we're pushing 100,000 signs out there. So that's a lot of signs you got to maintain. And per regulation, right, we have to maintain them. So you can see there's about 42,000, 43,000 stop signs, speed limit signs, and so on. We also maintain the neighborhood traffic control, right? Some of you probably seen some chokers, some speed humps, or islands on the roads. We are responsible for installing them and maintaining those. And we also are responsible for streetlights. There's two ownership of streetlights on the county. One is basically lease streetlights. These are the lights who are on utility poles. Those are owned by BGE, but we still pay the power for it. And the other ones are purely owned and maintained, and purely owned by the county, still maintained by BGE. So we are close to like 45,000 streetlights in the county. Next slide, please. So these are the assets within your region, right? So you can see how we narrow it down to your region. And we have some of the marked roads are 40 marked roads. We have about close to 50 miles of yellow, close to 50 miles of white lines. All the number of crosswalks are saying that we have to maintain. there are many assets that we have to maintain. So how do we do that? Next slide, please. We get two type of fundings, right? We get a operating funding, and that is every year we get an operate to pay our salaries. And on top of that, we get to buy materials. So we get funds to buy materials. For example, we get to buy signal parts, we get to buy the paint and the marking that goes online, and also we get to buy metal and to fabricate the signs. By the way, we fabricate 80 to 90% of the signs that get installed in the county. We fabricate them. We do not source it out. So I got 2 sign fabricators at the shop. One of these days, there's an open house. You're more than welcome to come to my shop. You'll be able to see all of our different activities that we do there. And on top of that, we also get some capital funding. These are recurring capital funding. So we've had Councilwoman Lacy on. Every year we go through the capital funding budget process, and these are recurring that come every year. We get the same amount. So we have a capital project. We do a signal modification. These helps us to renovate basically 1 to 2 signals per year. We get $350,000 to do a new traffic signal, county design and county install. We do get some new traffic signal part of the subdivision process. The neighborhood traffic calming or the neighborhood traffic control, we get $150,000. This is what helps us install the speed humps, the islands, the chokers you've probably seen around. And we also have $150,000 and under the new street lighting capital project. This is in coordination with the county police. And basically the county police is the lead agency on this one, where you as a resident might be concerned about some activities taking place and we want to install a new street light. This is the program. New street lighting is done 2 ways, through a subdivision process or through the new street lighting capital project. That's the only way we can get new street lighting in the county at this moment. We have streetlight conversion. About six years ago, we decided as a county that it was time to retire the Mercury streetlights, and we are in the process of upgrading those to LEDs. So every new streetlight in the county is LED, both for efficiency and for lower power usage. The pole replacement capital project is, as it sounds, is for replacing those fiberglass poles. As they get old, the average age of a pole is about 20 to 25 years. They bloom and create an issue for a pedestrian if it touches that fiberglass, so it can get in your hands. So we're in the process of replacing those as well. The highway safety program is not directly managed by us, it's through the Bureau of Engineering, but that's the capital project that we use to study and also do some construction hot spots for doing some infrastructure improvement. Next slide, please. Here are some quick examples within Region 2 of capital projects that we've done. So on Clack Road, within a couple of years, we've done some speed flashers. For example, we've done a speed limit reduction. I think Mark wanted for me to touch on some how do we do speed limit. So we've done some speed limit reduction in your region. We've done some pedestrian crossing improvements. On Russet Green Air Community, we've done some enhancements, and these are basically a new type of signing where it's dynamic, right? It will flash when you press the button to raise awareness that you're waiting to cross, and to inform the drivers that you're going to be crossing the street. We also done some speed humps we're going to be doing speed humps on Wright Road. We've been working with communities. We've done some speed humps on Dorchester Boulevard, and we are working with Orchard Avenue right now to do some traffic calming as well. So these are community-driven projects. We go to the community and we work through the process with them. Streetlights, we've done some around the Pursuit streetlights, Park Place, and some Shipless Homestead. Next slide, please. So this is all the different bureaus in DPW. So if there are any issues that you would like concerned with, you're more than welcome. We are customer driven. You call us, we need to address it. The orange cone is Bureau of Highways. anything from potholes to sinking in sidewalks. If you even have a street light that is out, or even if you have a faded or dirty sign, you can call that number and we're going to get to it. That's the quick presentation I have for you, and be open for questions.
Well, great. Well, thank you, Nestor. That was super helpful. And I know I've worked with you in the past on the Restaurant Community Association, and others have, and you've always been very, very helpful. So thank you so much. It looks like Nicole Walsh Meadows has a question. Nicole?
I worked with Nestor extensively on many projects in Russet, the pedestrian walkway, and then the blinky light thing that we did. I wanted to ask you, Brock Bridge is still 2 lanes, Whiskey Bottom is still 2 lanes. I know we've done a lot of traffic studies. You've helped us extensively with Tommy Middleton to get some traffic studies done. What is it going to take to get those 2 roads to be widened?
Well, 2 ways, right? We talked about with the Office of Transportation, they could be a sponsor for a long, a road to be widened. The other way is that I can become a sponsor for a capital project. Right now, the only way that we can get a project like that would be that we're going to have to compete with other capital projects in the county. So if the community of Russet, for example, would like us to do, I can become a sponsor. Prime example is at the corner of Old Mill and Oakwood, I became a sponsor. Now we're gonna look into doing a roundabout. Pleasant Plains Road, we're doing a full study to see what we can do. So that's the only mechanism that we have of improving a major facility like that. It has to come through a sponsor. We're gonna have to study into getting a detailed traffic study, right? Because the different levels, right? You got the planning level studies that Tanya and the OPZ does, and then we got to get into the weeds as an engineer. Okay, we want to do Brock Bridge, we're going to make it wider. What do we do? Here's the study to make it happen and progress it. Each year you will see phase in. Phase 1 will be a study, phase 2 will be the engineering, phase 3 will be into the actual construction. Okay.
The concern is, Lester, there's been a lot of growth because the townhomes have now come on Brock Bridge. The watershed is now coming. Mr. Thompson has a lovely new development coming on the Howard County side of Paddock Point. So the concern is all this other new development is coming. You still got 2-lane roads. You know what I mean? Right.
And then exactly. So it usually comes with working with us for the community, right? Or with Tanya's group, because they're the planning of transportation. So either of us can be sponsored into getting a capital project. I'm not gonna stay in my lane, but if the OPC long range plan can come in, because for example, how do we get Marley Neck Boulevard, right? All these developments coming along, and they all agree they were gonna do half section improvement as they travel down the road. You get the ultimate cross section on Marley Neck Boulevard. So that's the discussion that's taking internally to the county. How do we do that? We're trying to think outside the box to address your concerns, right? What the community is saying, all these developments coming in, what are we doing, right? In the perfect world, it should be the facility is already there, and then the development comes in, correct? Because the facility, that's the perfect world. That's our ideal textbook planning, right? Unfortunately, we're 30 years ahead now, we're behind. So it will be then, because they're 30 years behind, then the DPW are gonna take the bulk of it, and we can probably become a sponsor. And I got no problem being a sponsor for you and the community as we hear these issues, right? And then I might start as the original sponsor and somebody else might take over and finish it, for example. But that would be the only opportunity that I know of, unless my other colleagues from the planning can chime in and give another idea how we can make this happen.
Okay, I still have your contact info, so I may reach out to you offline because it's too much. I mean, you know how it is over there. It's just too much. You still have these choke points in the afternoon, and even though they put that extra lane on 198, it's still a choke point when that lane ends at the Crab Shack and the gas station. is still a choke point from the Volkswagen dealer all the way down at 3:30 in the afternoon until 6 o'clock. And then if people go down Brock Bridge and then get on 32 up there, you have the choke point there. So it didn't make any difference other than you have a third lane of traffic or that second lane of traffic on 198. You know what I mean? So it didn't do any improvement other than give you 2 lanes of traffic at 3:30.
Right. And then we're probably going to have to partner up with, because at either end, we got the state facilities we can fix it. And then we end up with the choke points at the state facility. So it becomes a bigger issue, but we're doing it right now with the state. So we're doing it on 214. So it's not an impossible task. It's just us, like you, being organized and basically, as you know, I'm a do traffic operations. So I do a lot of putting out fires daily. Right. So I don't, sometimes I'm very myopic in my thing, right? So when we get into certain meetings, I'm like, well, I operate, you guys think the long range, I'm going to make it day to day. I'm going to limp away, or hopefully with technology, they can get better. But staying focused, and this group can help. And Mark is a great staff to have, because when he sees these type of plans, he actually keeps me honest. Says, hey, Nestor, remember we had this issue at this location? And I say, yeah, Mark, I'm gonna get to it right now with my funds, what I can do shortly. But with a major project like this, I can be the sponsor, and the hard part will be getting on the books, and then we can start building into something.
Now, knowing your background with that region, if we had to pick one of the 2 roads to do first, Whiskey Bottom or Brock Bridge,
I would think, but the problem with Brock Bridge will be all the environmental impacts, right? So again, I'm a highway design engineer, but that would be the difficult part. You got the bridge crossing and all those issues. So that would be a big push. And then you had the railroad track on one side. So you got a lot of constraint going through there. The lower hanging fruit will be Whiskey Bottom, right? That would be the lower hanging fruit from my perspective. Probably some environmental impacts, some coordination with Howard County, some coordination with the state. But if you put me on the spot, I think that's where we can start thinking. But I know that some of you working with Eric Terry, he's my area engineer for your section of the county. So we can start with that, and I can jump in. And at the end, again, if we want to start with a sponsor, I mentioned the HSI capital project. That is a starter, because we have consultants on call. We can use them, get us started with a study, and see where we can go with it. Because a study, $100,000 to $150,000, I can accommodate that through the HSI. But then once you get to the design, and once you get to the construction, that's when we go and compete with other capital projects. Okay.
gotcha. And then we could just do it from the racetrack, from the Anne Arundel side back.
We could.
Okay, got you.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot. Appreciate
welcome.
your insight. Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Well, just a reminder for the SAC members to use the Jamboard. And Mr. Flores, I have a question for one of our members. They wanted to know, how does the county fix potholes, and how do you prioritize which roads to fix and maintain?
Well, actually, Potholes we have a 2-day turnaround. So we have a website, or you can call that number that I had, and we try to respond pretty quickly on potholes. So because we don't want to deteriorate to a point that we're going to have to do a big patch, right? Yeah. We want to be able to keep it under control. So if you Google our DPW highways, and there's a pothole hotline, we have a pothole hotline, call it in, and there's no priority. We just try to get there as quickly as we can. It's almost like an emergency type of response. We treat those because we want to control the pothole. We don't want it to get to a point that we can get to a wash out and so on.
Okay. Any other questions from SAC members? No, seeing none, I think we're good. I think it was a very helpful presentation. So thank you so much for joining us this evening, and we will move on to our next segment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. So good news is we're ahead of schedule now, which is great. I think we'll be able to get off a little early and folks can grab some dinner. So just wanted to remind everyone that I'm really excited to announce that our next meeting will be in person at the Maryland City Library near in the Russet community. I I really wanted to emphasize with the SAC members to please try as best as you can to make the meeting in person, because we are going to have some breakout discussions and really be able to kind of tackle some issues. So I think it'll be really important for us to be able to, you know, meet in person, have conversations, and then we can do some breakouts as we go from there. So also just wanted to let everyone know that we will stream the meeting live, but this isn't necessarily meant to be a hybrid meeting. It is very difficult to chair a meeting in person while also work virtually. So we will have a live feed, but we are not going to be monitoring it. So folks want to participate, please show up and be in person there. So, and then looks like, Mark, you have some other pieces up here. So Mark, do you want to cover any other of these events and opportunities?
Sure. Yeah. So just a couple of reminders here for the next month or two. Following up on Tanya's presentation.
Oh no, looks like Mark, you froze. Nicole, did he freeze for you too? Okay. All right, well, I'll keep talking then. So, oh, Mark, you froze a little bit. So do you mind starting over? You froze right as you started talking.
Apologize. Yep. So following up on Tanya's presentation, 10 more days left here in the Pedestrian Bicycle Master Plan survey. Please visit that and provide some feedback. And then the feedback maps for Region 2, where people could drop a pin saying, I love it, fix it, dream it. Those close June 9th. We've incorporated the points from our driving tour into that map. So if any of the SAC members would like to visit that and add some more commentary, that would be, and again, that closes June 9th. Joe covered June 16th, and then July 21st, again, we'll decide on how we want to hold that meeting, whether it's virtually or in person. I'm going to send out in the next week a spreadsheet just to identify what potential venues there are within Region 2. OPZ has a couple ideas, but we'd like to also hear from you if there are other community spaces available for us to meet then, just so that we're not constantly meeting in one area of the region, that we can meet throughout the entire region. So we'll send that around early next week. So I think those were all the reminders. Carrie, what else?
That's it.
Okay. Yeah. Joe, back to you.
Yeah, so just open forum here. Any other questions or thoughts on the in-person meeting? Anything we need to consider? I think we'll go ahead and still keep it at 6 o'clock unless anybody has any strong objections. I know it's going to be tough. Traffic is getting heavier and heavier as people are going back to the office, but I think if we can start at 6, we can get done, relatively early versus going too late into the evening. Okay, great. Well, excellent. Well, thank you all. I know this wasn't as action-packed as the last one, which is nice, where we can take a little bit of a breather and also end a little early, which is good. So I just want to thank everyone. I hope you all have a wonderful May. Stay safe out there, and I look forward to seeing you all in person next month. So thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you.